And welcome to Queeries. I'm Brian, and as you can see, through the power of television, I'm still here with the Reverend Dr. Adam Wirrig from St. John's United Church of Christ downtown, and continuing with our second conversation, or the second part of our conversation about religion in general.
So this is episode 2,
Oh,
Attack of the Religious Clones.
Oh my God, here we go with the Star Wars. I have to tell you, I'm a Star Trek guy. Anyway.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, indeed. So now that we've got that out. So you had mentioned before that, with regard to that there was a good reference, a Star Wars reference that could kind of describe kind of what we're experiencing right now. What do you mean?
Well, I think what you see is, much like in Star Wars, you have the rebellion, and it's this point that, equality, democracy, etc., are important. Mm-hmm. And I think you're finding that maybe in its own ways being expressed in mainline Christianity again, in ways of welcome, in ways of standing up for social justice, mm-hmm. in ways of supporting and caring for the environment. And you're finding a lot of people who have been previously in, or at least at the most tacitly supportive of, say, the fundamentalist ideology of Christianity that has really set the tone for the last 30 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think you're finding them starting to go, wait a minute, this is real. This makes much more sense. This reflects my life so much better.
Okay.
And you're finding a lot of people, I think, shifting in a lot of places and spaces, religiously, that is.
Okay.
However, I think you're also seeing, I don't know if I would necessarily associate the fundamentalist world with the empire of Star Wars, but for analogy's sake, much as the empire is not exactly thrilled to give up power mm-hmm. in Star Wars, and will do everything against it to have that happen. I think you're seeing that in a lot of ways with fundamentalist Christianity. I think you're seeing, the moves become far more desperate as things go along. Mm-hmm. Really aligning themselves with a political entity that I think they are greatly regretting right now. Really sacrificing a lot of their principles and the things that they've said they've stood for to be dominant, mm-hmm. so to speak. I think people are very aware of that and seeing that, and that the more desperate they get, as Carrie Fisher once said, in the movie, mm-hmm.
The more you tighten your grip, the more systems will slip through your fingers.
Mm-hmm.
The more you try and hang on to power, the quicker you're going to lose it.
Well, and I think that one of the things that has really always kind of really rankled me is that, let's take for example like the pro-life movement, which I think, honestly speaking, is not. They're pro-fetus. There was a great quote from a nun.
Pro-birth.
Pro-birth, yeah. Pro-fetus/birth. And then after that, if you fall short of whatever they view as the way you're supposed to live, the heck with you. And I think that we see it, in terms of like this animosity to the thought of, that, healthcare should be a right, not a privilege, or mm-hmm. that, when we're seeing just the absolute horror doesn't even begin to describe kind of what I feel, with regard to, immigrants coming in and families being separated. We've got 500 kids whose parents have been deported. We don't know
where they are.
I mean, this is just patently antithetical to a
Absolutely.
Truly pro-life stance, so to speak. Do they even understand the hypocrisy of what they're doing, based on what they're doing? Do you think?
I think what you're seeing is right now, in a lot of ways, is a lot of people having to recognize that, and we'll use the pro-life movement here, that faith is not a one-button issue.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't align yourself with a party, whether it's on the left or the right, mm-hmm. and say, well, I'm supporting them because this that they support aligns with my spiritual views. You get a lot more than you bargained for when you do that,
mm-hmm.
and it's generally not good. Now, at the same point in time, I would challenge some of the assumptions
about the pro-life movement. I have a number of friends who are in that movement, and they very much would say that, you know, we are trying to do other things as well, but there's very much a cognitive dissonance that I've noticed popping up as well. That, you know, it's getting harder and harder to say, well, yes, you know, I don't agree with this, but each and every day, it would seem, it's getting far more difficult. And I think I referenced last episode, you know, even the Southern Baptist Convention is coming out now and saying, whoa, whoa, we have got to put the brakes on this whole aligning ourselves spiritually with a political movement and hitching our star to its success or its failure.
Right.
That is not what we are called to be and what we are here to do.
Well, you know, and I also agree. I mean, from the standpoint, you know, I know several people that are pro-life, but they are totally pro-life. I mean, it doesn't matter from birth to, you know, let's give people, you know, the ability to get medical care. Let's, you know, treat gay and lesbian people and transgender people with absolute respect. And, you know, just the whole 9 yards. That's stuff I can respect.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the ones that it's here's the stopping point. And then after that, we are no longer going to care. Once that baby is born, after that, fine. But we want to have that baby born. I mean, there are those that are that nutty that's pretty much where they've got that hard line.
Well, I don't know that I'd say they're that nutty so much as I would say that they have not experienced, the vast majority of people I experience who are in that world and in that mindset really have not experienced a broad swath of life.
So they've been more insulated?
I would say very much so. You know, and one of the things if I get into a conversation with a person like that, one of the things that I bring up in conversation is, okay, so what you're telling me is that you're okay with the government mandating some form of birth control or not. Well, no, of course I'm not okay with that. Well, that's what you're saying, because you're essentially allowing the government to step in. If you overturn Roe v. Wade, you're allowing the government to step in and mandate or deny a form of birth control. Now, are you going to find anybody who says, you know, abortion's great, abortion's wonderful, and it's you know, it's no moral concern for anybody? I think you're going to find, if you find anybody like that, it's going to be a very rare and very small.
And I would argue just as nutty as, you know.
I think so, absolutely.
You know, so.
But at the same point in time, I think you're going to find that, you know, when confronted with a wider reality, when you say, hey, so let's talk about, or let me introduce you. You know, I've always found the best way to counter somebody's points is to introduce them to somebody who lives in a reality that is contrary to what they're saying.
Sure.
You know, once they meet people who are, you know, maybe did not receive the education that they should have about sex ed or reproductive health, and got pregnant, because, you know, we've proven that with access to quality reproductive health education, we really drop the rate of abortion. But we really, in a lot of places, there's still a mindset of, if we teach people about sex, then they're going to have more sex.
They're going to have it left and right. And
yes, and that's just really not the case, time and again.
Yep.
But once you introduce them to somebody who has been failed by that mindset, by that thought of don't teach them and they won't do it, and then you say, and this person cannot care for this child, so are you going to let their child, especially after they met them, are you going to let them die? Are you going to let them go hungry at night? Is that what you're saying you're supportive of?
Right.
And the answer changes pretty quickly.
Well, I guess, you know, I guess the other thing, you know, a lot of them will also say that, you know, well, there's always the adoption route. And I'm going, okay, but there's a fair glut of children that need homes that are still, you know, they're either in the foster system or they're not. And it's like, so, okay, you're going to adopt because they're a cute little baby and that's it? Or, you know, forget the ones that are still.
You know, I know a lot of people who've adopted, and some of them have adopted older children, some of them have adopted younger children.
I myself, I don't know enough about the adoption system to really make a classification or a thought on it. That is if you can't take care of your child and you don't want your child to go through hardship, I would support you if you wanted to give them up for adoption. At the same point in time, I don't think that that should have to be
the only
your
option.
fallback.
Right.
Oops, here you are. Well, you've got to give them up for adoption. That is, I think that is just dehumanizing in and of itself.
Oh, sure. Or you've been deemed, well, you can't take care of this child, we're going to take that child away from you.
But, again, I don't know enough about that system to really speak educatedly about that.
Sure.
But I do know that there are parents out there waiting just as much as there are children who are waiting in the system.
Yep.
So I would think that, I don't know. I think that's a very
I think that there's just so
complex
many.
and tricky.
This is like an onion of complexity. Is really. I mean, because we do have to start from the standpoint that by our very nature, humans are hypocritical.
We tend to be, yes.
Yeah, and I always joke that we're the smartest, dumbest species on the planet, because that's pretty much true. But I think that, I guess the thing that for me, growing up as a kid, growing up Catholic and being steeped in Catholicism, and here's the right and the wrong, and yet that it just feels, for me, it feels funny that, because I've now lumped myself into agnosticism. Most people assume I'm an atheist. I'm like, no, I have no idea. I can't even comprehend a being that is as powerful and as what you're describing. I can't even fathom that. I don't even know.
That's funny because I tell people, when they're like, so how do you do it being a pastor? I mean, are you up at like 7 a.m. praying? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not a morning person to start with, so I'm definitely not doing that. But they're like, okay, so are you praying at like 12 at night? And I'm like, no. look, I'm like, guys, we're really, really the same as you in a lot of ways.
You're not some like weird creature of...
Yeah, no, it does not, ordination does not bring with it some, magical transformation in that you suddenly have all the answers and you have no problems or anything.
Right.
One of the things I tell people all the time is that, you cannot have faith without doubt. And there are all kinds of doubts that I have. And there are, I often, most of those, am trying to figure them out, but it takes time for that. I tell people quite honestly, there are days where I am very much a traveling agnostic, and I'm like, I have no idea.
Right.
Don't ask me. I'm just here. I'm gonna go do something that is relatively non-spiritual based that I don't have to think for a while.
Right.
And it's okay. That's okay.
Sure.
I think that's one of the things we've been told for so long, is that if you're going to be a person of faith, you have to always be a person of faith, and you have to have this figured out, and you have to trust, and you have to, believe, and you have to, know that this is how it's going to be. And in effect, that mindset really creates a situation where we ourselves become godlike, because we know, we understand how things are going to work. And
we're going to give you this answer, and here's how it's going to be.
And in essence, we tell God, okay, God, here's what I know you're going to do, so go do it.
Which is kind of not how it really should be working.
Yeah, that's not how that works. And if you, take the totality of Scripture as a whole, and I say that Scripture is a narrative of faith that leads us farther into existence with God. And you see time and again, people doubt. People get angry. People get frustrated.
Well, look at it.
It's okay.
Well, even Jesus himself, is questioning.
Jesus has very human moments, depending on which gospel you're in.
Absolutely, it's like where you're questioning. Why have you forsaken me? That's like
there's all kinds of stuff, and it's called being human. Is what I tell people all the time.
Well, that's the thing too that kind of gets me is that where the divinity of Jesus. And hence he's, walking around earth, like God and all that. And I'm like, well, if Jesus came down as human, and for him to really understand humanity, he had to have all the same issues.
That gets to all the fun. Yeah, the classic church doctrine on this fully human, fully divine is, I think, it doesn't work really well, as I guess is the easiest way to say it. I'm not going to say it's wrong or it's false, because that's really not my area of specialty, and I don't want to.
Right.
I'll have a colleague running through the door before this ends, ready to hit me with a Molotov cocktail or something. But I think you see in the life of Jesus that there are moments of definite divine understanding and divine action. But there are also equally moments of humanity.
Sure.
You know, one of the classic texts in the story of Jesus is, you know, there's a woman where Jesus refers to her with a racial slur of the time. That's not really a divine thing to do.
Right, yep.
You know, you're not going to find anybody. Well, maybe in the 1950s you'd find somebody.
True.
But, you know, people are not really, and this always makes people squirm when I bring this up, because it's like, look, it's kind of, it's like, this is Jesus having a human moment. He's tired, he's cranky, he's hungry, and this woman, who is the arch enemy of the Hebrew people, or from a camp of people who are the arch enemies of the Hebrew people, like, he's reacting the same way you and I would react.
Right.
And that's part of the wonder of the stories, is that we find ourselves in them if we stop and really get down to what's happening, instead of looking at them kind of like we talked about earlier with, you know, this is what it is just because it's what is written. If we start getting into them and getting, as an old professor of mine used to say, underneath the stories, we find ourselves in this. And when we find ourselves in these stories, then we begin to find God. And it's something that is challenging and frustrating and head banging against the wall kind of stuff, and then yet so amazing and wonderful and good as well.
Well, and I've also, you know, one of the things that I've told, oh gosh, I forget, this was years ago, where, you know, I had stopped going to church and all that kind of stuff because I just didn't really feel the need to anymore. And well, you can't, you know, you can't be Christian if you're not going to church. And I just looked at myself, you know, honestly speaking, there are times when I look up, you know, at a sunset, and I go, wow. Or I look at you know, I see the pictures that we have of, you know, the planets in our solar system, stars, you know, nebulae and all that, and I say, wow. And I said, you know, in so many cases, based on some of the places that I've gone to church, I think that I've had a bigger faith moment in those moments than I ever had within a building.
I tell people quite frequently, and sometimes it drives some of my leaders nuts, of, you know, you don't always have to come to church. It's okay. If you are sitting at home and you're having breakfast on the deck and you are just really in a spirit of gratitude, and you're finding yourself really open to things, and you're really stopping to notice the wonder of that which is around you, you know, I think that is just as important as coming and going, you know, to church. You know, spirituality and faith happen not within a building, but they happen within a life. And it's, you know, life is not contained simply within one setting and one existent, or well, within one person.
Right.
And you have to experience life to really know it. And so you have to experience faith as well.
Well, and it's kind of like also the whole thing of, well, you behaved so very piously within that building, but then your actions outside of the building speak a completely different, you know, language, and it's like, what is it about this building that has any real?
Yeah, I fight this battle even in the progressive church quite a bit, having a historic church that is definitely very, very nice inside. And some people are just really wedded to the grandeur of the building. And
that this is God's house and God is here.
And, you know, there's a like I said, no, no person is perfect. No faith system is perfect.
Sure.
And that's a battle that I think is not limited just to those perhaps on the more conservative side.
Oh, well, that's true. I mean, we all fall into we all start drinking our own Kool-Aid at some point.
Oh,
and the other thing is that the one thing that I love, because I like to just sit and ponder, and everything that I say isn't actually, you can't treat it as gospel, because half the time I'm just pulling it out of my rear end sometimes. But one of the things that I've, you've got to be Christian and know Jesus and all that. But I'm like, well, these other faiths in other parts of the world kind of view us in the same light. So maybe it's just that culture's attempt to understand the divine. It's just their language of understanding the divine. It's not...
I used to teach world religions at the college level, and making a very long answer very short, because I know we're closing in on time here. I will say that I don't know that all paths lead to the same spot. At the same point, I will say that I know enough to know that I shouldn't say that there's no way that all paths don't lead to the same.
Right.
So I really, I'm learning just as much as anybody else, I would say, on that. But I think there's definitely some truth to that, in that there's a level of interchange and interplay that definitely exists among all religious faiths.
No, it makes perfect sense. In the end, I don't even know. Again, the whole agnostic thing, I don't know.
I don't know either. That's the whole thing about faith.
Well, there you go. Well, and I guess too, the thing is that go forth and do no harm. I mean, seriously, and love your neighbor, treat people with. I mean, just the very basics. You can even take religion out of it. That these are the fundamental building blocks of society. Just treating people with respect. Don't kill them. Don't lie about them. Don't.
Yeah, I think you've got it, and that's really the thing is that that's faith as well. This is the summary. What you're talking about is what Jesus summarized as the whole point of the law and the commandments is this. And faith itself is just this: is love your neighbor as yourself.
It's deceivingly simple and yet complex at the same time, I think.
It is wonderfully fulfilling and horribly, just frightening all in the same breath. And that's what it's supposed to be.
Well, yeah, true.
If it was simple.
Well, yeah, no, you make a really, really good point. I guess nothing about life is simple.
Yeah, pretty much.
Whether it's faith or outside of faith, there's nothing simple about life. I mean, we claw. We're born. We claw our way through it until death, and hopefully we
if it was easy, it wouldn't be worthwhile.
Very true. Well, that's true. That is a very good point, and probably the best place to end. So, thank you very much, Adam. Thank you for being on the show. We're gonna talk. We're talking more. Yeah. I've got an idea for a good idea for a continuing segment that I've jokingly referred to as the pastor and the prodigal. Me being the prodigal.
You might be surprised.
Oh, well, there we go. Maybe we switch roles periodically. I don't know. But it was wonderful having you on. First time.
Thank you.
And see, you've already had a 2-show deal already, and potentially more in the works.
Oh, you poor people.
Nah. Excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll definitely put some information up on our website, and we look forward to watching us next week.
All right. Thank you.